The jungle air on Vex Prime hung thick and wet, making every breath feel like drinking soup. Jiwoo wiped sweat from her forehead and checked her scanner again. The numbers looked good. The mineral deposits in this canyon were exactly what the company needed. "We should head back," Hyun said behind her. He always said that. He worried about everything. 5 more minutes, Jiwoo replied. She moved closer to the rock face, running her gloved hand across the dark stone. Veins of blue crystal ran through it like frozen lightning. Beautiful. Valuable. Worth the trip into the deep jungle. Hyun shifted his weight from foot to foot. His eyes kept moving, watching the thick plants around them. The supervisor said not to stay out past noon. It's almost 1. Thalmora says a lot of things. Jiwoo pulled out her sample kit. Just 1 piece of that crystal and they could confirm the whole deposit. 1 piece and they could go home. She reached up to a jutting piece of crystal. Her fingers wrapped around it. She pulled. The crystal didn't move. She pulled harder. Still nothing. She braced her feet against the rock and yanked with all her strength. The crystal broke free. Jiwoo fell backward, landing hard on the rocky ground. The crystal flew from her hand and smashed against the equipment case behind her. Sharp pieces scattered everywhere. "Are you okay?" Hyun rushed over, helping her sit up. "Yeah, I'm..." Jiwoo looked down at her hand. A long cut ran across her palm. Deep. Blood welled up fast, dripping between her fingers onto the gray stone below. "Oh, that's not good." Hyun pulled out the medical kit. "We need to wrap this now. Hold still." But before he could open the kit, alarms started screaming. Both their wrist communicators lit up red. The portable scanner beside them flashed warning symbols. "Large predator." Hyun read from his screen, his voice going high. "Moving fast. 1,500 meters and closing." He looked up at Jiwoo, eyes wide. "It's a wren claw." Everyone who worked on Vex Prime knew about wren claws. 15 feet tall. 6 legs ending in claws that could cut through steel. Armored hide that reflected most weapons. They could smell fear from miles away and hunted anything that moved. 3 workers had died to wren claws just last month. "Run," Jiwoo said. She tried to stand, but her legs felt weak. The cut hurt worse than she expected. "The evac point is 200 meters, Hyun said, looking at his scanner. He wrapped one of Jiwoo's arms around his shoulder and started pulling her along. "Come on!" They stumbled through the equipment past the scanner, heading for the clearing where the transport ship would pick them up. Behind them, something crashed through the jungle. Trees shook. The ground trembled with heavy footsteps. Jiwoo's hand throbbed. Blood ran down her wrist, dripping onto the ground as they moved. A trail of red drops followed them through the gray rocks. The crashing got louder, closer. They burst into the clearing. The transport ship sat there, door open, pilot waving frantically at them. Other workers were already inside, faces pressed against the windows. "Hurry!" the pilot shouted. They were 50 meters away, 40, 30. The wren claw exploded from the jungle behind them. Jiwoo made the mistake of looking back. The creature was massive. Its body looked like dark metal covered in plates of natural armor. 6 legs moved with terrible speed. Its head was all teeth and sensory organs, twitching and seeking. And its claws, each one as long as Jiwoo's arm, glowing slightly at the edges where they could cut through anything. "Don't look," Hyun shouted, dragging her forward. 20 meters to the ship. The wren claw closed the distance in seconds. It was faster than anything that size should be. Its claws dug into the ground with each step, throwing up chunks of rock and dirt. 10 meters. The pilot started closing the door.
"I have to launch."
"I'm sorry. Wait," Hyun screamed. The wren claw stopped. Just stopped. Right there. 20 feet behind them, Jiwoo and Hyun stumbled to a halt, turning slowly. The pilot froze with his hand on the door control. Everyone in the ship went silent. The wren claw stood perfectly still. Its head was raised, sensory organs spread wide, twitching. It was smelling the air, smelling something. Then slowly its legs folded. The massive creature lowered itself to the ground. Its eyes closed. Its breathing slowed. Within seconds it looked dead, or asleep, completely motionless except for the slightest rise and fall of its chest. "What?" Hyun whispered.
"What is it doing?"
Jiwoo looked down at her hand. Blood still dripped from the cut, pattering onto the rock. She looked back at the wren claw, at the distance between them, at the creature that could have killed them both easily, but instead chose to collapse. "I don't know," she said quietly. The pilot's voice crackled over the communicator. "Get in the ship. Now, before it wakes up or whatever it's doing. They didn't need to be told twice. Hyun pulled Jiwoo into the ship. The door slammed shut. The engines roared to life. Through the window, Jiwoo watched the Ren claw as they lifted off. It didn't move. Didn't even twitch. It looked dead, but it wasn't. Something about that was more frightening than if it had attacked. Back at the base camp, Thalmora's insect-like face couldn't hide her confusion. She watched the recording from Jiwoo's suit camera for the 5th time. Her compound eyes reflected the screen's light. "This is impossible," Thalmora said. Her mandibles clicked together, a sign of deep thought. "Ren claws don't stop. They don't retreat. They certainly don't collapse." "But it did," Hyun said. He sat beside Jiwoo in the medical bay, watching as a doctor sealed the cut on her hand with synthetic skin. "Play it again," another worker said. A small crowd had gathered. Word spread fast in a small base. The recording played again. The chase. The Rend claw closing in, then stopping, smelling the air, collapsing. "Look there." Someone pointed at the screen, right before it stops. "The human's blood is dripping." "You can see it!" Everyone leaned closer. Sure enough, drops of blood were visible falling from Jiwoo's hand, catching the light. "Rend claws hunt by smell," the doctor said slowly. "They can detect specific chemicals from enormous distances, fear, adrenaline, injury. So it smelled her blood and—" "What, got scared?" Hyun shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. They hunt injured prey all the time. That's their favorite kind." Thalmora turned off the screen. She looked at Jiwoo with an expression that might have been concern or might have been fascination. Hard to tell with insect faces. "I'm sending this recording to the xenobiology department," Thalmora said, "and to corporate headquarters, and to the Galactic Wildlife Authority." She paused. Something about human blood made an apex predator fake its own death. That's never happened before. Not once in all the years we've been on this planet. Jiwoo flexed her newly sealed hand. It didn't hurt anymore, but she could still feel phantom drops of blood falling. Could still see that massive creature collapsing in her mind. "Maybe it was sick," she offered. "Maybe," Thalmora said, but she didn't sound convinced. Nobody did. That night, Jiwoo lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the jungle of Vex Prime hummed with life. Somewhere out there, the Ren claw had probably woken up and gone back to hunting. Probably killed something else by now. But it hadn't killed her. It had smelled her blood and decided to play dead instead. Why? The question kept her awake long into the night. And she didn't know that across the galaxy other humans were about to have very similar experiences. She didn't know that her bleeding hand had revealed something about humanity, that the universe was not prepared to learn. She only knew that something was very, very different about the way predators saw her species, and different in a galaxy full of monsters could be either wonderful or terrible. She suspected it was going to be both. 3 weeks after Jiwoo's encounter, the reports started piling up. A human worker on Tellus 4 got mauled by a pack creature. His arm was bleeding badly. The pack surrounded him, ready to finish the kill. Then they all scattered like someone had fired a weapon. But no weapon was fired. The man lived. On Crescent Station, a cage broke during a wildlife transport. A creature called a thornback escaped. 800 pounds of armored muscle and poisoned spines. It cornered a human maintenance worker in a dead-end hallway. The worker had cut her leg on broken metal. She was bleeding. The thornback took one look at her, hissed and ran the other direction, smashing through a wall to escape. 5 more incidents in 2 weeks. All the same pattern. Injured human. Dangerous predator. Predator retreats or plays dead. That's when they sent Minji. She arrived on Vex Prime on a gray morning when the jungle was still covered in mist. Jiwoo met her at the landing pad, surprised that a real scientist had come all this way just to talk to her. Minji was young, maybe 30, with tired eyes and 3 bags full of equipment. She smiled when she saw Jiwoo, but it was the kind of smile people used when they were too busy to mean it. "Thank you for agreeing to this," Minji said, shaking Jiwoo's hand. "I know you probably want to forget about what happened." "I mostly want to understand it," Jiwoo replied honestly. They walked to the medical building, where Minji had set up a temporary lab. Inside, screens covered every wall, showing data and charts that Jiwoo couldn't understand. One screen showed the recording from Jiwoo's suit camera, the Ren claw collapsing, frozen in the moment, I've watched this 400 times, Minji said, setting down her bags. I've also watched all the other incident recordings. There's something here. Something important. Over the next few days, Minji took samples from Jiwoo. Blood, skin, sweat, saliva. She ran tests that Jiwoo didn't understand. She asked questions about Jiwoo's childhood, her health, her family history. Were you ever unusually brave as a child? Minji asked one afternoon. Jiwoo thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. I grew up in the countryside on Earth, lots of animals around. My parents said I never really got scared of them. Tell me more. Well, there was this one time. I was maybe 12. A bear came near our house, big one. My dad was getting ready to call animal control, but I just walked outside. Looked at it. It looked at me. Then it left. Minji stopped typing and stared at Jiwoo. A bear? Yeah. Just looked at you and left. Yeah. My parents thought it was weird, but nothing bad happened, so... Jiwoo shrugged. I never thought about it much. Minji went back to typing very fast. This matches the others. 4 of the 7 humans in the incidents reported similar childhood experiences. Animals that should have been dangerous, just leaving them alone. What does it mean? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Meanwhile, Hyun had been doing research of his own. He found old reports, things from when humans first started expanding into space, buried in corporate archives and military databases, stories that people dismissed as exaggerations or luck. He brought them to Minji's lab one evening, spread printouts across her desk. Look at this one. Hyun pointed to a report from 40 years ago. Human colony on Brador Prime. Raiders attacked using trained war beasts. The beasts killed 3 aliens but refused to attack the 2 humans, even though the humans were armed and actively shooting at them. Minji picked up another report. Mining accident on Vel Station. Human trapped underground with a tunnel collapsed. Local predators should have found and killed him. Instead, they gathered around him but didn't attack. Rescue workers found him 3 days later, alive, surrounded by dead creatures that appeared to have starved rather than eat him. There's more, Hyun said quietly. Lots more. Decades of reports. Everyone just wrote them off as luck or coincidence. It's not coincidence. Minji pulled up a new screen. Look at this. I compared human blood samples to samples from 17 other species. Humans have a unique combination of chemical markers. Pheromones, hormones, other compounds. Nothing else in the galaxy has this exact mixture. Jiwoo leaned forward. What does the mixture do? I think it tells predators something. Something that makes them not want to fight us. A new voice spoke from the doorway. That's ridiculous. A tall reptilian alien stood there, scales gleaming green in the light. I'm Krivak, Xenobiology Department, and this theory is nonsense. Minji's jaw tightened. The data shows some interesting chemical differences, nothing more. You're building a fantasy because you want humans to be special. Krivak moved into the room, his long tail swishing behind him. Every species thinks they're unique. You're not. Then explain the incidents, Hyun said. Random chance. Statistical anomaly. Predators aren't robots, they don't always attack. Sometimes they retreat for reasons we don't understand yet. That doesn't mean there's something magical about human blood. Minji pulled up another screen. Then explain this. We captured a juvenile Renclaw yesterday. Not dangerous, just big. We exposed it to blood samples from different species in sealed containers. Couldn't see what was in the containers. Couldn't know what species the blood came from. The screen showed a creature in a cage, with several small containers being placed in front of it one at a time. When we gave it blood from 6 different alien species, it showed interest, moved closer. Typical predator behavior when detecting prey. Minji clicked to the next video. When we gave it the human blood sample, it did this. On the screen, the young Renclaw approached the container, sniffed, then suddenly backed up, pressing itself against the far wall of the cage. Its breathing got fast. Its legs folded. It lowered itself to the ground and went still, just like the one that had almost killed Jiwoo. Krivak stared at the screen. For a long moment, he said nothing. We ran the test 6 times, Minji said quietly. Same result every time. And we've started testing with other species. So far, 7 out of 9 predator species show some level of avoidance behavior when exposed to human blood. The other 2 show extreme stress responses. But why? Jiwoo asked. What is it about us? Minji sat down heavily in her chair. She rubbed her eyes. I have a theory. I need to do more research to confirm it, but I think it has to do with how humans evolved. She pulled up images of Earth, old Earth before space travel, forests and plains and mountains. Most species in the galaxy evolved as either prey or as territorial predators. They learned to run from bigger threats. They learned to fight for territory, but retreat when outmatched. They learned survival through knowing when to give up. Minji looked at each of them in turn. Humans didn't evolve that way. What do you mean? Hyan asked. Humans are persistence hunters. We evolved to chase prey until it died of exhaustion. We evolved to never give up. A human hunter could track an animal for days. Days. Until the animal's body just gave out. We couldn't run fast or bite hard or see in the dark, but we could keep going when everything else stopped. Jiwoo felt a chill run through her. That's not just behavior, Minji continued. That's encoded in our biology, in our chemistry. And I think predators can smell it. They can detect that we're something different, something that won't stop, won't surrender, won't die easily. That sounds like it would make us better prey, Krivak said, but his voice was uncertain now. Persistent prey is just annoying prey. No, Minji shook her head. Think about it from a predator's perspective. You attack something, it gets injured, it bleeds, but instead of getting weaker, instead of running or submitting, it smells like something that's going to keep fighting, keep coming. Never stop until one of you is dead. She paused. Would you want to fight something like that? Or would you conserve your energy and find easier prey? The room went quiet. The Renclaw played dead, Jiwoo said slowly, understanding dawning. It didn't run. It played dead because that's what prey does when they can't escape. It was pretending to be prey instead of predator. Exactly. Minji's eyes were bright now, excited despite her exhaustion. It recognized something in your blood. Some chemical signature that said, this prey is actually a predator too, and it's more dangerous than me. So it did the only thing it could think of. It faked death and hoped you'd leave it alone. Hyun laughed suddenly, a short bark of sound. We scare the monsters. You scare the monsters, Krivak corrected quietly. Not we. I don't have this effect. None of my species does. This is human. Doyen arrived the next day. He was human, broad-shouldered, with the careful way of moving that marked ex-military. He carried classified files that made even Minji's eyes go wide. Combat footage, Doyen explained, setting up a secure viewer, from the border conflicts 8 years ago. Never released to public. The footage showed human soldiers fighting. Jiwoo had to look away from some of it. Too much blood, too much violence. But Hyun and Minji watched everything. In one clip, a human soldier was badly wounded. His squad was pinned down. The enemy had released war beasts, massive creatures bred specifically for killing. The beast charged toward the human squad. Then, meters away from the wounded soldier, they all veered off, refused to attack him. They went after the alien soldiers in the squad instead. Command couldn't explain it, Doyen said. Chalked it up to faulty beast training. But there are dozens of clips like this. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Humans were special. Human blood kept predators away. One small vial could protect an entire worksite. Frontier colonies that lost dozens of workers every year to wildlife could become completely safe. All they needed was a few humans willing to donate. The corporate offers started within days of Minji's research going public. Jiwoo first heard about it from Hyun, who burst into her quarters one evening holding his communicator like it might explode. They're offering what? Jiwoo grabbed the device and read the message herself, then read it again, sure she'd made a mistake. But no, the number was real. Vex Mining Consortium was offering her 2 million credits for a 1-year blood donation contract. Regular donations enough to supply protection pheromones for 3 colony worlds. That's more money than I'd make in 20 years of normal work, Jiwoo said quietly. They sent me one too. Half that amount. But still. Hyan sat down heavily on her bunk. Everyone's getting offers. Every human in the company. Over the next week, 17 more offers came. Different companies, different amounts, but all wanting the same thing. Human blood, human sweat, human tissue samples. Anything that carried the chemical signature that scared predators. Minji's lab got moved to a bigger facility, then an even bigger one. Scientists from across the galaxy came to study the phenomenon. News feeds ran constant updates. There were debates on government channels about ethics and exploitation. There were black market rumors of human blood going for incredible prices. And then the Terran government made their announcement. Junho stood at a podium on Earth, transmitted across every human colony. He was older, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen too much. Chairman of the Human Ethics Committee. "We understand the demand," Junho said carefully. "We understand that our biology can save lives. But we will not allow humanity to become a commodity. We will not let our people be reduced to blood banks for profit." Jiwoo watched the broadcast in the base common room, surrounded by other workers. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked disappointed. 2 million credits was 2 million credits. However, Junho continued, "we recognize the potential good. Therefore, the Terran government will allow voluntary donations under strict regulation. Donors must be compensated fairly. They must maintain medical oversight. And the use of human biological materials must be limited to safety applications only." "That's reasonable," Hyen said beside Jiwoo. But Krivak, watching from the back of the room, shook his head. "It won't matter. Once you put a price on something this valuable, reason dies." He was right. Within a month, a black market exploded. Human blood that should have cost a few hundred credits through legal channels sold for tens of thousands illegally. Some humans, desperate for money, sold directly to smugglers. Others were approached by criminal syndicates with offers too good to refuse. Hanul appeared on corporate news channels, perfectly dressed, with a smile that never reached her eyes. She was an executive for Frontier Solutions, one of the largest colony development corporations in the galaxy. "We're simply helping supply meet demand," Hanul said, when a reporter asked about her company's aggressive recruitment of human donors. "These people are volunteering, they're being paid, everyone benefits." But Minji, exhausted in her expanded lab, saw the truth in the data. "Look at these patterns," she told Jiwoo during one of Jiwoo's checkups. Minji pulled up a map of human space. Red dots marked locations across hundreds of worlds. "These are reported kidnappings or disappearances of humans from remote colonies. The numbers have tripled in 2 months." Jiwoo felt her stomach turn. "People are being taken?" "We think so. It's hard to prove. These are frontier worlds, dangerous places. People go missing sometimes. But this many, this fast?" Minji shook her head. "Something's wrong." Doyen was already investigating. His security position gave him access to reports that most people never saw. What he found made him contact military friends, former colleagues who still worked in intelligence. They met in a secure room, 5 of them, all looking at evidence that made them sick. "There are at least 7 facilities we've confirmed," Doyen said, pointing to locations on a star map. "Hidden in unregulated space, they're holding humans, dozens at each location, and extracting blood, tissue, everything, then selling it on the black market." "Can we raid them?" one of his colleagues asked. "Not legally. They're outside Terran jurisdiction, and the local governments are either paid off or don't care." Doyen's jaw tightened. "We need a different approach." But before they could plan anything, things got worse. A human colony on the edge of the frontier sent out a distress signal. Raiders had attacked. Not for supplies or territory, for people. They took 43 humans, mostly young adults, and left everyone else alive. Just took the humans and vanished. Jiwoo heard about it during breakfast. She dropped her fork. Around her, other humans went silent, faces pale. "This is because of what I found," Minji said that evening. She sat in Jiwoo's quarters, holding a cup of tea she hadn't touched. "Because I published the research. I made humans valuable, and now people are suffering." "You revealed the truth," Jiwoo replied. "That's not the same as causing this, isn't it?" Before Jiwoo could answer, alarms started blaring. Base-wide emergency. Everyone to defensive positions. They ran to the command center where Thalmora was coordinating response. On the screens, approaching ships, lots of them. Not Terran design, not friendly. "Mercenaries," Thalmora said, her mandibles clicking rapidly in stress. "They're demanding we surrender all human workers. If we refuse, they'll attack." Hyon looked at Jiwoo. Jiwoo looked at the 40 other humans on the base. They were surrounded by 300 alien workers who had become friends, colleagues, family over the years. We can't let them attack everyone because of us, Jiwoo said. No, Thalmora said firmly. You're under my protection, all of you, we fight. The battle was brief and brutal. The base had defenses, but the mercenaries were well equipped. They breached the outer perimeter. Ground troops poured in. They moved with purpose, scanning for humans, ignoring the aliens unless they got in the way. Jiwoo found herself trapped in a storage building with 10 other humans and a handful of alien defenders. Through the windows, she could see mercenaries approaching. They had weapons designed for capture, not killing. Stun guns, nets, containment fields. They want us alive, Hien said, gripping a mining tool like a weapon. That's good, right? That's worse, Doyen replied. He'd been on the base visiting Minji when the attack started. Now he stood at the door, a real weapon in his hands. Means they have buyers waiting. Means they're organized. The mercenaries breached the door. Doyen fired, dropping 2. But there were too many. They poured in, surrounding them. Then something strange happened. One of the mercenaries got too close to Jiwoo. She'd been backing away, knocked into a shelf, cut her arm on a sharp edge. Blood soaked through her sleeve. The mercenary raised his stun gun. Paused. Backed up a step. What's wrong? His commander shouted over the radio. The blood, the mercenary said, his voice uncertain. The human's bleeding and I... He backed up another step. I can't. Something's wrong. More mercenaries entered. They all stopped when they got near the bleeding humans. Some lowered their weapons. Some looked confused. One dropped his weapon entirely and ran. What's happening? Hien whispered. Minji, crouched behind a container, started laughing. Terrible, exhausted, desperate laughter. They're not all using face masks. They can smell us. Smell the blood. And they're having the same response as the predators. But they're sentient, Krivak said from where he was protecting a group of humans. They should be able to overcome instinct. Should, Minji agreed. But evolution is older than civilization, older than reason. The mercenary commander, watching through a drone camera, saw his troops faltering. He ordered them to use masks to filter out the smell. But the damage was done. The humans had seen that bleeding made them more dangerous, not less. That their own biology was a weapon. The mercenaries retreated, not defeated, but unwilling to continue. They left without taking a single human. That night, Jiwoo sat with Minji and Hien on the roof of the medical building, watching the stars. This is just the beginning, Minji said quietly. Now everyone knows that human blood affects sentient species too, not just animals. The demand is going to increase. The kidnappings will get worse and people like Hanul will get richer. So what do we do? Hien asked. Before anyone could answer, Doyen climbed up to join them. His face was grim. I just got word from intelligence. There's been a coordinated series of raids across 12 colonies, hundreds of humans taken. They're being held in hidden facilities and basically farmed for blood. He sat down heavily. But there's more. Some governments are talking about controlling human movement, keeping humans in protected zones. For our own safety, they say. They want to make us prisoners, Jiwoo said. Protected resources, Doyen corrected. But yes, same thing. Jiwoo looked up at the stars, at the vast galaxy that suddenly felt much smaller and more dangerous. 6 months ago, she'd been a simple mining engineer. Now she was valuable property. Now her blood was worth more than her labor. Now predators fled from her scent, but thinking beings wanted to cage her. We need to organize, she said suddenly. All of us. Every human. We. 18 months after the Renclaw incident, the first shots were fired. Not by humans. The Terran Defense Fleet had spent a year trying diplomacy, sanctions, and appeals to the Galactic Council. But the kidnappings continued. The illegal facilities multiplied. And then the Vex Consortium, backed by 6 other major corporations, sent a fleet to the human colony of New Sol. Their demand was simple. Hand over 30% of the human population for protective custody and voluntary donation, programs, or face military occupation. The colony refused. The fleet opened fire. That's when everything changed. Sunwoo stood on the bridge of the TDF Indomitable, watching the tactical display. He was young for a fleet admiral, only 42. but the politicians had chosen him because he thought differently than traditional military minds. Right now he was proving why. They outnumber us 3-1, his tactical officer reported. Conventional strategy says we should retreat. Conventional strategy doesn't account for who we are. Sunwoo smiled, cold and calculating. Deploy the injured. The tactic was simple, brutal, and effective. Human soldiers with minor injuries, cuts, bleeding wounds, nothing life-threatening, were placed in the front positions. When enemy boarding parties breached their ships, they found themselves facing bleeding humans who should have been weak, but fought like demons. The boarding parties hesitated. Their war beast refused to advance. Their soldiers, many of whom could smell human blood through their suits, found their training failing them. Ancient instincts screamed at them to retreat from prey that smelled wrong. That smelled dangerous. The TDF forces counterattacked into that moment of hesitation. They won the Battle of New Seoul. Not easily, but decisively. News of the victory spread fast. So did news of the tactic. Human forces had used their own biology as a weapon. They'd turned their vulnerability into strength. The galaxy was horrified and terrified. Yuna watched the news feeds from the training facility on Mars. She commanded the 5th Special Forces Division, humanity's most elite ground troops. Now every government in the galaxy wanted to know what humans could do if they stopped trying to be peaceful. They're calling it the Blood Doctrine, her second-in-command said, pulling up news articles. Human forces deliberately wounding themselves to gain tactical advantage. They're saying we're savages. Let them say it, Yuna replied. She was looking at casualty reports instead. Human casualties were lower than predicted. Enemy casualties were high, very high, because when cornered, when bleeding, humans didn't surrender. They fought harder. She thought about her great-grandmother's stories of Earth before space travel. Stories of humans hunting mammoths, of tracking prey for days across impossible terrain, of humans who got injured and kept going because stopping meant death. That persistence wasn't gone. It was encoded in every human's DNA, waiting for the right moment to emerge. This was that moment. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from 100 worlds gathered on the neutral station above Sanctuary Prime. The human delegation, led by Junho, faced accusations of barbarism, of violating the laws of civilized warfare. You weaponize your own blood, the Krellian ambassador said, her voice dripping with disgust. You wound yourselves deliberately. This is madness, this is survival, Junho replied calmly. For years you've hunted us, kidnapped us, farmed us like animals. Now you complain that we defend ourselves effectively? There are rules. We followed your rules. Junho's voice rose just slightly. We appealed to this council. We showed evidence of thousands of kidnapped humans. You did nothing. You debated. You formed committees. Meanwhile, our people suffered. So yes, we're using every advantage we have, including our biology. The council chamber erupted in argument. Some species sided with humanity. Others called for sanctions, blockades, military action to control the human threat. In the end, they voted to authorize force. A coalition fleet would be assembled to secure human worlds and ensure galactic safety. It was war. Official declared galaxy-wide war. Jiwoo heard the news in the command center on Vex Prime. The mining base had transformed over the past year. Now it was a military outpost defended by human and allied forces. She'd transformed too. The engineer who'd once taken mineral samples was now a defensive coordinator, trained in tactics and combat. Hyun worked beside her, managing communication networks. Minji was there too. Her scientific expertise now focused on understanding how to maximize humanity's biological advantages without harming human soldiers. They're really coming, Hyun said, looking at the fleet projections. That's 200 ships. We have maybe 40 in this sector. Doesn't matter. Do-yoon entered the command center, now wearing the uniform of a fleet security commander. Numbers aren't everything. They're learning that. He pulled up battle reports from across human space. At Tellus Station, a human garrison held off a force 5 times their size. At the Brador colonies, enemy war beasts turned on their handlers rather than face bleeding human soldiers. At Crescent Outpost, a single wounded human pilot held a choke point against 50 enemy troops for 6 hours, until reinforcements arrived. The pattern was becoming clear. Humans who were injured didn't weaken. they became more dangerous. Something about bleeding, about pain, about injury triggered responses in humans that the galaxy couldn't comprehend. Adrenaline, endorphins, ancient survival mechanisms that turned wounded humans into relentless fighters, and the enemy could smell it. Could smell that something was wrong about fighting humans, that injured humans weren't easy prey. They were cornered predators. It's not just physical, Minji explained to the command staff one evening. She'd been studying combat data, correlating human injuries with enemy behavior. When a human is wounded, our body releases specific chemical compounds. Stress hormones, yes, but also others that we don't fully understand. These compounds intensify the predator signature that already exists in human biology. So bleeding makes us scarier, Jiwoo said. Bleeding makes you apex predators in truth instead of just chemistry. The enemy's instincts recognize a wounded human as something that won't stop, won't surrender, and will fight until one of you is dead. Most species can't override that instinctual response. Krivak, who'd stayed on Vex Prime throughout the escalation, nodded slowly. My people have a saying, never corner what you cannot kill. You've cornered humanity, and the galaxy is learning you cannot be killed easily. The great battle for Vex Prime came 3 months into the war. 200 ships, just as predicted. They surrounded the planet, cutting off all escape routes. Ground forces landed in a dozen locations. The largest force headed straight for the main base. Yuna's division had arrived 2 weeks earlier. Now her soldiers took positions throughout the facility, ready for urban combat. Many of them bore minor injuries. Controlled cuts on arms or legs, bleeding but not dangerous. The blood doctrine in action. Jiwoo stood at her station, coordinating defensive positions when the enemy breached the outer wall. Here they come, Doyen said calmly. Remember the plan. Let them commit to the kill zones. Then spring the trap. The enemy poured through the breach. Thousands of soldiers, dozens of war beasts, heavy armor support. They advanced on the base with overwhelming force. The human defenders opened fire. Not with everything, just enough to slow the advance. The enemy pushed forward, smelling victory. Then they entered the prepared zones. The war beasts went first. They'd been brought specifically to fight humans, conditioned for months to ignore the fear response. But conditioning broke when they got close enough to smell the blood of wounded human soldiers. The beasts panicked, some fled, others turned on their handlers. The enemy soldiers followed, pushing through the chaos of their own war beasts. They reached the first defensive line, found themselves facing bleeding humans who fought with intensity that broke enemy formations. When an enemy squad would wound a human soldier and expect them to fall back, the soldier would instead fight harder, more ferociously. It was against every tactical doctrine. Wounded soldiers should be weak, should retreat, should need evacuation. Human soldiers just kept fighting. Their morale is breaking, the tactical officer reported. Enemy units are requesting permission to retreat. Denied, came the response from the enemy command. Push forward. They're only humans, but they weren't only humans. They were apex predators backed into a corner, and evolution had given them tools the galaxy had never faced before. Sunwoo watched the battle from orbit aboard the Indomitable. His fleet was outnumbered, but he'd learned to use that. He positioned his most damaged ships, hull breaches leaking air, looking vulnerable in exposed positions. The enemy fleet moved to destroy them. Then the damaged ships opened up with full weapons. They'd been bait. The real damaged ships were the ones that had quietly moved into attack positions, fleeting atmosphere and controlled vents that created clouds that looked like battle damage, but were really cover for approach vectors. Even in space combat, humans had learned to weaponize their wounds. The battle raged for 3 days. In the end, the enemy fleet retreated. Not defeated entirely, but broken, unwilling to continue. The ground forces, traumatized by fighting opponents who got more dangerous when wounded, pulled back to their ships. Vex Prime held. 2 years after a bleeding hand revealed humanity's secret, Jiwoo stood in the same canyon where it all began. The war had been over for 3 months, not ended with a grand victory or total defeat, but with something more complex, something more human. She remembered the moment it changed, the moment that made peace possible. It happened on a battlefield on the border world of Kessler 9. Yuna's forces had cornered an enemy battalion. The enemy commander, a seasoned warrior named Veltok from a species called the Harken, had been wounded in the fighting. He was bleeding. His soldiers were surrounded, Standard tactics said to finish them. The enemy had been brutal in their attacks, showing no mercy to human colonies. This was the chance to eliminate an entire enemy unit. Yuna approached under a flag of truce. Veltok waited, weapon in hand, expecting death. "You're injured," Yuna said simply. "Kill me, then." Veltok's voice was steady despite the fear in his eyes. "But spare my soldiers. They were following orders." "I'm not going to kill you." Yuna gestured to her medic. "We're going to treat your wounds. Then you're going to talk to your commanders. Tell them what you saw here." "What did I see?" Yuna looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. "You saw that humans can choose mercy, even when you don't deserve it. Especially then." The broadcast of that moment went across every news network in the galaxy. A human commander, standing in blood-soaked armor, choosing to heal an enemy instead of finishing him, choosing restraint when violence would have been easier. It broke something, some assumption the galaxy had made about humans, that they were just violent predators who fought without thought. That their persistence meant they couldn't stop, but humans could stop. They could choose. That made them more terrifying in some ways and more reassuring in others. The peace talks began a week later. Now, months later, Jiwoo walked through the canyon. The mining equipment was still there, rusted and forgotten. The company had pulled out during the war. Maybe they'd come back someday. Maybe not. "I thought I'd find you here." Hyun appeared at the canyon entrance. He looked different now. Everyone did. The war had changed them all. "Just thinking," Jiwoo said, "about how it started. About how much has changed. Minji's giving her final presentation today. The one to the Galactic Council, I know. I just needed some air first." They walked together through the canyon, boots crunching on loose rock. Above them, the Vex Prime jungle hummed with life. Somewhere out there, Renclaws hunted their prey. The war hadn't changed them. They were what they'd always been. Humans were what had changed. The council chambers were packed. Representatives from every major species attended, either in person or via hologram. The human delegation sat in the center, Junho as chairman with Minji, Doyun, Sunwoo, and Yuna representing different aspects of humanity's response to the crisis. Jiwoo and Hyeon took seats in the observation area, watching as Minji prepared her presentation. 2 years ago, Minji began, her voice steady. "I published research that changed everything. I showed that human biology contains markers that trigger fear responses in other species. I showed that we're recognized on an instinctual level as apex predators." The chamber was silent. Everyone knew this already, but they listened. What I didn't understand then was why this matters, why it's important beyond just the practical applications. Minji pulled up images of Earth. Old Earth. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We chased prey until it died of exhaustion. We didn't give up. Ever. This isn't just behavior. It's encoded in our biochemistry. She changed the image to show different species. Most of you evolved differently. As prey species, you learned when to flee. As predators, you learned when to abandon a hunt. You learned that survival sometimes means accepting defeat and living to fight another day. These are good strategies. They work. Another image. This one showing the chemical compounds in human blood. Humans never developed those strategies, because in our evolutionary environment, giving up meant death. A human who abandoned the hunt starved. A human who accepted defeat to a predator was eaten. So we evolved to never stop, never surrender, never accept defeat until death. Murmurs ran through the chamber. This was known, but hearing it laid out so clearly made many uncomfortable. "This made us dangerous," Minji continued. "Dangerous to hunt, dangerous to fight, and dangerous to ourselves when we couldn't control that drive." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But here's what I've learned in 2 years of war and research. That same evolutionary pressure that made us unable to quit gave us something else. The ability to persist not just in fighting, but in anything. In solving problems. In building. In healing. In forgiving." The image changed to show Yuna treating Veltok's wounds. This moment wasn't a weakness. It was the ultimate expression of human nature. We persist in our values. We persist in our choices. Even when it would be easier to give in to violence, Krivak stood from his seat. The reptilian scientist had become an unlikely advocate for humanity during the war. "You're saying that the same biology that made humans terrifying also makes them capable of great restraint?" "I'm saying that persistence works both ways. Yes, we'll fight until we can't fight anymore, But we'll also work for peace until we find it. We'll search for answers until we discover them. We'll keep trying to do the right thing even when it's hard. Junho rose to speak. The war happened because the galaxy tried to control us, to harvest us, to treat us as resources instead of people. We fought back because that's what you do when someone tries to cage you. But we never wanted war. We wanted recognition, respect, the right to control our own fate. And now, the council chairman asked, what does humanity want now? Doyen stood. We want the kidnapped humans returned. All of them. We want the illegal facilities shut down. We want prosecution of those who profited from human trafficking. That's being arranged, the chairman confirmed. What else? Sun Wu stood, and despite being in a chamber full of civilian leaders, his presence commanded attention. We want a treaty, one that recognizes human sovereignty, that makes it clear we're not a resource to be exploited. But, Yuna added, standing beside him, we're willing to share, on our terms. The chamber erupted in questions. Yuna raised a hand for silence. Humans will donate blood and tissue samples voluntarily. We'll create pheromone-based safety systems for frontier worlds. We'll help protect colonies from predators. But this will be done through an organization we control, with compensation we set, under rules we establish. You're creating a monopoly on human biology, one representative objected. We're exercising basic bodily autonomy, Junho corrected. Something every species in this chamber takes for granted. We're simply asking for the same right. The debate lasted hours, but in the end the vote was clear. The Human Sovereignty Accords passed with 70% approval. The terms were simple. Human biological materials could only be collected with informed consent. Humans would control the distribution and pricing of any products derived from their biology. Kidnapping or forced extraction of human materials was classified as a crime against sentience, punishable by the harshest penalties. A human-led organization would be established to manage voluntary donation programs, and humans would have the right to live and travel freely throughout the galaxy, with the same protections as any other species. Hanul watched the vote from a prison cell. She'd been convicted of human trafficking 3 weeks earlier. Her corporate empire was dismantled, her assets seized. She'd thought she was smart, exploiting a valuable resource before regulations could stop her. She'd learned the hard way that resources don't fight back. People do. On Vex Prime, in the rebuilt base command center, Talamora watched the vote with her compound eyes reflecting the screen. Around her, human and alien workers celebrated together. I didn't think they'd agree, she admitted to Jiwoo, who'd returned from the canyon. They were scared, Jiwoo replied. Scared of what we'd do if they kept treating us like property. Sometimes fear leads to respect. Is that what happened with the Renclaw? It feared you? Jiwoo smiled. I think it respected that I was dangerous. That's different than just being afraid. Later, Jiwoo found herself back in the canyon one more time. The sun was setting, painting the rocks golden red. She stood in the exact spot where she'd fallen 2 years ago, where she'd cut her hand, where everything changed. A sound made her turn. A Renclaw emerged from the jungle, massive and terrible. The same one? Maybe. Probably impossible to tell. It saw her, stopped, sniffed the air. Jiwoo didn't run, didn't reach for a weapon. She just stood there looking at the creature that had inadvertently revealed humanity's secret. The Renclaw watched her for a long moment. Then it turned and walked away. Not fleeing, not playing dead, just moving on, choosing not to hunt, because that's what smart predators do. They recognize other predators. They show respect by not starting fights that don't need to happen. Jiwoo smiled. She understood now what Minji had been trying to say. Being an apex predator wasn't about being the biggest or strongest. It was about being recognized as something that doesn't quit, something that persists. But the real power came from choosing what to persist in, violence or peace, revenge or healing. Humans had shown the galaxy they could persist in violence. The war had proven that beyond doubt, but now they had to prove something.